I've got an excellent little camera to show you today. This is my review of the Mobius Camera. This is the latest camera from the people that made the 808/16 keyring cameras, and this is a 1080p camera. Now, my review of the 808/16 camera came out on Christmas Day 2011. Now, the manufacturers saw my review, got in touch, and they asked me for a bit of feedback, some ideas about what they could put into their next camera to make it even better. Well, I got some feedback off the people that read my blog, and the things that we came up with are like this. I wanted a small, flat case about the size of a box of Tic Tac mints, a wide-angle lens, auto stop-start so it could be used as a car camera, and a price of about £50 or $70. Well, this is the 808/16 camera. This is the last one that they made, the last revision of it. This is the one with a 120-degree wide-angle lens. I've never actually reviewed this one. They just sent it in the post. The only reason I'm showing you this is to show you what that looks like compared to the Mobius camera. So that's that one, and this is the new Mobius camera. And you can see that they've acted on that feedback. It's a little square box, just like we wanted. It's dropped that stupid spy camera origins of the other one. We've got a microphone hole there next to the rather wide lens on the front. 3 buttons down the top here, which are clearly labelled for shutter, mode, and power. On the left there, we've got an LED. These 2 silver things, that's a heat sink to transfer the heat from the inside to the outside, because it's a plastic case, so that lets the heat escape. It gets quite warm in there, I think. We've got a USB plug on the back, standard size, by the way, a micro SD card slot spring-loaded above that little reset hole, and to the right of that there's another hole, and that's for an LED which they've put on just for me. I'll tell you a little bit about that later on. On the bottom here, where the 2 screws are, that's also used for holding a mount to it, as is this sort of bit around the edge here, this ridge. Quite clever actually, I'll show you that properly later on. But let's get it switched on. Well, first thing is you turn the power on by pressing the power button. Rather obviously, the light flashes. It takes a couple of seconds to get up and running, this one. But once it's running, you can see the light flashing there. It's recording now. It goes straight into record from standby. That's out of the box, but you can change those settings afterwards. Press the shutter button, it goes into standby. Press the mode button. The blue LED means 720p 60 mode. Press it again, it shows a red LED, that's the photo mode, and press it again, we get back to the 1080p 30 mode. And again, if you just press the shutter button, when it's flashing, it's recording, and when the light's on permanently, it means it's in standby. Again, all these things can be changed in the settings, by the way. But we'll press the mode button again, and we'll get into that photo mode. And I'll just take a couple of photos. So just press the shutter button here, it takes a single photo. Again, we can take multiple photos if we want by changing the settings. I'll show you all that later on. But if we want to turn it off, just a matter of holding down the power switch for a couple of seconds. There's a little bit of a flash and it turns off. Now, as far as the weight goes, the camera is 38.9 grams, which in ounces is 1.37. Useful for the remote control aircraft folks, that kind of information. Now, I got all these things. I got the sort of deluxe set with everything. Now, one thing I didn't mention, the camera comes with a lens cap, which is quite useful for when you're carrying it around. I've also got this little tripod so you can use it as a webcam. It's got a rather long USB lead here, which is a standard USB-A to mini-B lead, 3 meters long though. That's very useful. That's to attach to this, of course, for using it in a car so you can get it up to the windscreen. We've got a double-sided bit of sticky back Velcro here. That's very useful for mounting it to things. A very simple mount, of course. There's more complicated ones. We've got this one here so you can attach it to a car windscreen, a sort of suction cup mount. Usual thing, ball joint suction cup, rather normal. We've also got this one here, which is a similar thing, ball joint, but that's got a sticky back pad on it. This is the one that I use later on for attaching it to my motorcycle helmet. Not really perfect because that mount is a bit flat and my motorcycle helmet's rounded. But anyway, we've got this one for a bicycle handlebar, of course. As you can see there, it's adjustable. We've got bits of rubber in the middle there, and the usual sort of twisty ball joint thing so you can sort of direction the camera just how you want it. And then what else have we got here? There's a few more bits. This is a wire, obviously. This is for plugging it into a TV, AV out, but it's a bit of a weird wire. I'll tell you why that's a bit odd later on. It's got all those sort of bits on it. Makes sense when you know what it's for. I've got a standard USB-A to mini-B lead, that's for data transfer and charging. This little thing here, this little Allen key, which is a bit out of focus, that can be used to adjust the lens inside this. They've deliberately not glued the lens because some people like to make the lens focus on things close up. And this little bit is very important, very useful. It's a little cradle with a tripod screw hole on the bottom there. And this attaches to the camera like so. I'll just show you. There's this sort of ridge around the outside here, and that slides into those little sort of clips at the top there. So you can see I'll just sort of slide it in front to back, and it clips in place, and it holds it really firmly, because on the bottom here, these two bits at the front also go in those screw holes that I mentioned before. Now that is brilliant, because you can mount it to everything now. You've got a standard tripod screw mounts. That's all you need, really. And of course, you've still got access to that USB port and the memory card on it as well. So brilliant little thing. To slide it out, you just give it a bit of pressure and it comes out, but it doesn't come out easily. You're not going to lose it out of that. Now, of course, that tripod screw thing sticks out a bit. Now notice there's some straps on here. There's some strap holes, I should say. So you could put a strap through it if you could get that out. Well, of course you can. They've designed it so it can be pushed out like this by just pushing the legs on it, so you can get that out. And now you've got a perfectly flat mount, so you could put that bit of Velcro on the back of there, or you could strap it to a vented helmet or something like that. It's very useful, and of course again you can just click that back in there if you want to use it as a tripod mount again. Brilliant little thing, that. Now let's look at some video that I shot with the camera. I've mentioned here that I've shot this with various firmwares. There's been 3 firmware updates while I've been doing my testing. Just thought I'd let you know. Now to start off, let's look at some nice sharp 1080p footage from a static position. Looks really good, this, doesn't it? You can see from left to right, top to bottom, it's sharp all the way across the picture. Very clear. The colours are nice as well. It looks great. Now let's look at 720p. Notice I haven't moved here, by the way. I'm sat in the same position, but I'm only getting the centre of the image. The 720p uses the centre of the sensor, and therefore you're only getting a much narrower image than the 1080p mode. We'll go back to 1080p again. 1080p is something around about 120 degree on the lens, or maybe 110 or 100, something like that. It's plenty wide enough anyway. It doesn't get too fisheye, it's just about right. 720p, I don't really know what degrees that is. Maybe that's sort of 60, 70, something like that. I do find it's too narrow though. When I'm shooting things, of course, remember I haven't got a viewfinder here. I'm just pointing them at things, and I tend to find it a little bit difficult to frame things properly. For example, look at this. This is 1080p. I'm just sort of holding it in my hand, pointing at this building, panning around. Here's Manchester Central. So I've got that in shot just by pointing at it. In 720p mode, that's what I was shooting. I wasn't sure where I was pointing, and obviously I was just a little bit out. I thought I was pointing at the clock on the top of it, so I missed that completely. Now let's just look at something with a little bit more movement in it. I'm walking up Market Street in Manchester here, holding the camera in my right hand. It's in 1080p mode. Now the camera of course doesn't have any built-in stabilisation, but digital stabilisation is always a disaster anyway, so that's probably a good thing. Now let's just have a listen to this chap opposite here. He's a bit of a Santana wannabe, probably a little bit more Sultana, but let's just have a listen anyway. Actually, that probably wasn't the best test because his amplifier actually sounded muffled. I'll play you something else later on. But look at the Woosang here. Lovely, sharp detail, nice bright colours. It looks great. Now let's just pop inside the Arndale to look at that wide angle again. You can see here, from left to right, it's very sharp all the way across. Now, if anything's a little bit odd, a bit blocky, a bit soft, download some samples from my blog. There's a link in the video description. You can see the real files, not the ones that YouTube has re-encoded. They're always going to look worse on YouTube than they did to start with. Let's look at 720p. That's 720p. You can see how much detail you lose. Now, remember, I'm recording in 720p 60. YouTube can only display 30 frames a second, another good reason to download those clips. Let's listen to this chap now. This is the Honky Tonk Man from Manchester. He's pretty good and he's a little bit clearer than the previous chap.
So smart, baby. Can't call your face. You better head up in the love.
I always think that his instrument playing ability is a lot better than his voice, but one thing that doesn't let him down is the audio quality from this camera. It does a pretty good job. There's none of the usual buzz or hiss or crackling, electrical interference kind of things that you get with little cameras like this, or you can get with cameras. This one doesn't have any of those problems. Let's head into the printworks now, where it's pretty dark. Let's just do a test first of all in the doorway between light and dark. So it's dark inside, light outside. The reason I'm doing this spinning back and forth is so you can look at how quickly the camera adjusts between bright, that it's in now, and dark. Pretty quick really, seamless in fact I'd say. Now let's just head inside. Hopefully there's no problems with taking photos in here, and we'll just pop in and have a look at this sort of dark bit at the end here where it's really pretty dark. Normally you've seen some of my other video reviews, this is almost black. Look at the contour one for an example. This is doing a really good job in low light. Now let's do something a little bit more exciting. I've attached it to the top of my motorcycle helmet. I use that sticky back mount, the one with the flat bottom on it and the sort of ball joint. It wasn't perfect because it didn't really mount to the curve of my helmet, so I sort of stuck it on the top. Looked like a bit of an idiot to be honest, but the footage it takes is pretty good. Now one thing to bear in mind, the camera isn't waterproof. I don't even think it's water resistant, but of course on a day like this you don't need to worry about things like that. Now I had less success with 720p mode, as you can see now. This is 720p 60. I ended up just recording the floor. That's because of the narrow field of view. I had the camera pointed slightly down, which meant I didn't really get much in shot. Difficult to frame things without a viewfinder. By the way, the wind noise, yeah, bit annoying, isn't it? Now, as far as photos go, I tried taking some, not that interested in these, but I took some snapshots, as you can see here. They're on screen now. They're okay. They're much like stills out of the video, to be honest, but in 4:3 format, which means they use the whole frame of the sensor. Now we'll just look at the specs from the camera quickly. Battery life, I got a good 80 minutes out of it, which is great for a little camera. Video files, AVC1 MOV files, that's an H.264 variant, 1080p 30, 18.4 megabits a second in high mode, 720p 60, 16.4 megabits a second. That means 10 minutes of 1080p video takes up 1.38 gigabytes. Now let's just have a look at changing some of those settings in the camera. Now I'm using a Mac. You're probably better off using a PC, to be honest, because it's a bit easier. But if you plug it into a Mac, of course, it turns up as an external drive. They're MOV files, so you can just press space and preview them very easily, import them into iMovie. They're very easy to work with. But when it comes to changing the settings, a bit of a different story. There is a program that's been made just for the PCs to change the settings in the camera. Now, I'm not going to go through all the things that you can change, but here are the different options on the screen. You can read these if you want. You've got time-lapse photos at the bottom left there, auto shut-off times. You can turn it on and auto start recording, or just turn on and not auto start recording. You can turn the lights on and off. You can have it loop if you want. You can change the length of those loops. You can have the date on and off. You can do everything that you could possibly want, to be honest. If you are going to ask any questions about can you do this, can you do that, bear in mind everything is now on the screen. So you can press pause. These are all the options that you can change. This and the previous screen that I was in. One of the things in the tools here, just press on this. This is pretty useful because it enables you to update this piece of software. You can download new firmware from the camera. It automatically checks for those. It makes it pretty foolproof, to be honest. It's a very useful piece of software. It's been made by one of the chaps off the RC Groups forums, I believe, and he's done a very good job here. Very easy to use and nice and handy for people. Now, it's a little bit different on a Mac, as I mentioned. You can do this on a PC as well, by the way. Hold down the M button and then hold down the power button. A red light will flash 3 times. This means that the camera has dumped a little config.txt file onto the memory card, and that can be edited in a text editor to change the settings. I'll just show you what it looks like now. This is it on screen. It looks like a lot of nonsense, but it's actually not all that complicated. All you do is change the number in the little square brackets on the left, and on the right it explains what each of those numbers do. So you can change the video modes around here. So if you turn it on, it goes into 1080p, but if you want, you can turn it on, it goes into 720p. You can see all the different options again down the screen here, all the same ones that are in the other piece of software, but it just gives you a bit of an idea how to change it on a Mac. So you change what you want, save it, put it back on the camera, disconnect the camera, and then do the same thing again. Hold down the M, hold down the power, and it'll read the settings back in again. Now you can also download an app from the Google Play Store which enables an Android device to update the camera on the go, as long as you've got the right cables and things, and of course an Android device that will work with this piece of software. But it's a pretty good idea because out and about you can change and fiddle around with those little settings without having to go back and attach your camera to a computer. Now there is an excellent instruction manual that's been made for this camera. It's been made by Isoprop off the RC Groups forums, I think, and all the information that you could possibly need is in there. It's completely foolproof and very simple, so no need to go asking me lots of questions, just read that. Updating the firmware, by the way, drag and drop onto the memory card, simple as that. Eject the memory card, or the camera as I should say, because the memory card's in the camera, and then all you need to do is turn on the camera, and you'll see the blue light flashing like a kind of nutter there, which means it's updated the firmware. I've updated the firmware 3 times on this camera without any problem at all. Now, just before the manufacturer was due to send me this camera to make this review, he sent me an email. He said he'd seen my beginner's guide to car cameras and realised that the Mobius would make a perfect car camera, but he just needed to do one thing. He needed to add an LED on the back of it so you could see it was recording when you were looking at the rear of the camera. So he did, which is nice, and here it is. At the back right there, that's where the LED is that he added in just for me. But don't worry about it, if you buy a Mobius camera, it will have that LED on the back of it. That's nice, isn't it, just doing something like that? Anyway, let's see how it works. You plug the power into it, the camera of course turns on as long as I've got it set to do that in the menus, and it starts recording in 1080p mode, which is the mode I've set at the top. Again, I suppose you could have it in 720p mode if you wanted to. Now you can see the little red LED on the back there flashing away. That means if you have it in your window here pointing like that, the wires coming out of the back, the red LEDs flashing on the back, and you can hide it away a lot more than you can with some other car cameras. In fact, this one can be pretty unnoticeable in a car, I think. Pull out the power, which is just to simulate what would happen if the power was disconnected to the camera in a car. You have it plugged in your lighter socket, the power disconnects when the car switches off, as long as your car does that, of course. And after a few seconds of me filling in time, you'll see that the camera stops recording there. So that's great. Now let's just see how that will work in a car. So of course you put it into that little cradle thing there. Now you can screw that into one of those mounts that they've supplied with mine. You don't get all these mounts every time. You have to buy the right package, by the way. Remember, links to buy this are in the video description, but it looks like that when you attach it to your windscreen with this mount. Of course, you could stick it on with Velcro or something, or sticky tape or whatever. Let's have a look at what the in-car footage looks like. Now, the first thing to mention about this, you'll see that the camera was upside down, or you might have spotted the camera was upside down there. There's an option in those menus in the settings again to flip the video 180 degrees, and that's what I've done here. That means the little timestamp, the tiny timestamp, is at the bottom left there. Again, that can be switched on and off if you want it to, but I've left it on in this one so you can see that I've flipped the video. And doesn't it look great? I think I've got HDR mode switched on here, which is why the sky's so nice and bright and blue, but then again, it was pretty nice actually after all. Now just wait a second, because just as I go around this bend to the right, you'll see it jump. There, that was it. Notice it jumped backwards in time. That was the gap, or no gap I suppose, between the two clips. The clips overlap by a little fraction of a second so you don't miss anything between clips. And remember, you can adjust the length of those clips to all different sort of lengths, so that doesn't happen often, or happens pretty often depending on what you've set it to. Now this is 720p shooting it from the car. Not much point really doing 720p, I think. You need that kind of nice wide angle out of a car window, but again, it's doing pretty good. You can see everything here. I'm sort of driving into the sun, which is why it's bleaching out a little bit, but again, pretty nice. 720p, fine. Let's test it at night. That's the big problem with car cameras. They're pretty rubbish at night, and obviously this one isn't, is it? Look at this, brilliant. I'm out at about 11 o'clock at night. Notice the timestamp at the top right and upside down on this one. That's because on this video I hadn't flipped the video 180 degrees in the settings, but that's neither here nor there because I just flipped it in the editing package. But doesn't it look great? It's really late at night. I don't know what that is, 11 o'clock or something. Really nice and sharp. The lights from the cars are illuminating the road, and it's as good as you're going to get out of a car camera at this time of night, I think. Does a really good job. Now let's just take it into another road just around the corner, darker road, where pretty much my lights are the only thing lighting up the road. There's these lights at the top, but they're all stuck up in trees. They don't light the road up much. And this looks really good as well. So it's an excellent car camera. Now let's try the TV out functionality. This is geared more towards people with remote control aircrafts. What they do is they put one of these cameras in their aircraft, they stream the video back to a receiver so that on the ground they can see what a pilot would have been able to see looking out of their remote control aircraft. It's a pretty cool technology really. This camera does it, by the way. Here I am just filming live video, but I'll press the record button and you can see the orange light at the bottom right there flashing on the device, which means I'm recording. So I've just recorded that minion there. Now we'll just stop recording. If you press the mode button, that's 720p 60 if I wanted to record in that. Press it again, that's the photo, so I could see a sort of live photo if I wanted to, and then press it for the 4th time and we get into the playback. And if I press the shutter button, you can see that I'm playing back the video that I just shot earlier on. Not that earlier on really, a couple of seconds ago. Now next press, mode button press, I start getting into the stuff I recorded before and it just moves through everything one at a time. Pretty unsophisticated. All you can do is move forward, or I suppose backwards, through the clips you've recorded, and every time you press the shutter button it'll play the clip. You can't go backwards through them, you can't do any sort of reverse or any of that business. So you also can't get back to that live video menu without turning the thing off and then turning it back on again, because that's right back at the beginning. I suppose it might have got there if I pressed the M button about 100 times to get through all the clips, but I couldn't be bothered finding out. So it does do live video out, and it does do video out while recording and whilst charging. It does everything that you possibly expect it to. In fact, it does a really good job of it, to be honest. So if you're one of these remote control aircraft guys, yeah, the camera does what you need. Now the wire that comes with it is this thing. Bit crazy looking really, but again geared more towards those remote control aircraft guys who like these kind of things that come apart and they can attach them up to their sort of video senders. Probably not that much use for someone that just wants to plug it into their TV to watch stuff back, but don't do that, play it on your computer anyway. Now there's a lot more information available about this camera from a few different sources. Firstly, if you want to get hold of that manual and the PC software, there's a link to those on my blog. Those have been done by a chap called Isoprop. Next, if you want to get hold of all the technical information about this camera, and the other 808 cameras for that matter, you want to go over to Chuck Law's site. That's chucklaw.com. He knows all about the ins and outs of these things. And then finally, if you want to know about some real world experience of people using these on remote control aircraft, you want to head over to the rcgroups.com forums. So this is the little 1080p camera that everyone's been waiting for. It can record really sharp video under all sorts of different lighting conditions. You can mount it to a bike or a helmet, use it as an action camera, as long as it's not going to get wet of course. Also put it inside your car, flip the video upside down. It's a lot better than most purpose-built car cameras that I've tested. And also you're able to hide it away a lot better. Another thing is that manufacturers are always going to keep updating the firmware on this one. This video is probably going to be out of date soon because they're always adding new features to this. And the best is left till last. They've managed to get the price for about $70 US or £50 for the basic set of a camera, a USB lead and that mounting plate. So while it might have taken a year and a half to get here since that first email exchange, it seems like it was definitely worth the wait. Anyway, for the moment, thanks for watching.